Pushpam Stapitam Yena Dukave Swayam Padam Adat Visva Vande Om Shri Guru Shri Padakam Shri Guru Vishnu Shri Rupam Sarvasvatam Sakana Vivanantam Tam Tamasji Sadhavaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakarla Lalita Shri Vishakam Tamsha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaur Tashe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Manchakalpatarorvyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Continue our reading, chapter 6, new chapter. Let there be a temple, part 10, part 2. I shall be the last man to give up Hare Krishna land to the rogue Mr. N. Prabhupada wrote to a life member just before leaving Ahmedabad for Bombay. Prabhupada was now immediately planning how to rectify his disciple's mistake. No money had yet been transferred, so perhaps it was not too late. Mr. N could not possibly understand why Prabhupada was so determined in his fight to keep the Juhu land. Not that Prabhupada had kept his motives hidden, but only a devotee can understand the mind or actions of another devotee. Mr. N was dealing with Prabhupada just as he had dealt with C Company. He had cheated them, and now he would cheat iskcon. He could only surmise that Prabhupada and his disciples were driven by the same motive as he himself, the only motive he could understand, material possessiveness. Actually, even Prabhupada's disciples were having difficulty understanding Prabhupada's unbreakable determination. Prabhupada's main motive was to preach Krishna consciousness in Bombay. Srila Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj ordered me to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and I have done that. Now I want to preach in India. Bombay was the most important city in India, the gateway. And within Bombay, Krishna had somehow led Prabhupada to this land, where he had begun preaching and had brought the deities of Radha and Krishna. In Prabhupada's eyes, the land was suitable for the large, gorgeous temple and international hotel he had planned. Bombay was an important city and required grand temple worship, large festivals, mass prasadam distribution, and a variety of Vedic cultural programs. The jewel land seemed ideal for a school, a theater, a library, apartments, a Hare Krishna city. So how could Prabhupada retreat from this rogue who was trying to cheat him? There would always be persons opposed to Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada said. But that did not mean the devotee should give in. A preacher had to be tolerant, and sometimes when all else failed and Krishna's interest was at stake, he had to fight. Another reason Prabhupada refused to give up this particular plot of land was that he had promised the deities Radha Rasabihari. He had invited Krishna here and prayed, dear sir, please stay here and I will build you a beautiful temple. So if using the land for missionary work was the obvious or external reason for Prabhupada's determination to keep his Hare Krishna land, then the internal reason was his personal commitment to the Lordship Shri Shri Radha Maharaj Bihari. Prabhupada's fighting spirit to keep the land was so keen that he sometimes appeared to be fighting for fighting's sake. He sometimes even compared Mr. N to the demon Kamsa in Srimad Bhagavatam, who had repeatedly tried to kill Krishna. Just as Kamsa had employed many minor demons in his attempts to kill Krishna, so Mr. N had employed demonic agents like lawyers, friends, and hoodlums. Krishna's killing of demons like Kamsa was his pastime or Leela. He enjoyed it. And Prabhupada, as the servant of Krishna, was fully absorbed in this fighting. He was vigilant, militant. When Mr. N bluffed or frightened the devotees, causing them to back down, Prabhupada held his ground. He took naturally to the fight. Krishna and Krishna's mission were being challenged. Prabhupada was acting as a protector and the parent of the deities and of iskcon Bombay. As he had described in the Nectar of Devotion, many great devotees have an eternal relationship with Krishna as his protector. When, as a child, Krishna had fought the serpent Karya, Krishna's mother and father had been plunged into transcendental anxiety. They had seen their child entangled in the coils of the serpent and, fearing for Krishna's life, had wanted to protect him. The eternal father and mother of Krishna always worry that Krishna may meet with harm, and when danger appears to come, their natural anxiety increases many times. In this way, they show the most intense love for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's mood was to protect Radharas Vihari and also his Krishna consciousness movement. Although he knew that Krishna was the supreme protector and that nobody could oppose his will, out of a protective desire to spread Krishna's glories, he feared that the demon Mr. N might harm Krishna. Prabhupada's feelings of anxiety and protectiveness extended to his disciples also. He saw them as children with little worldly experience. They did not know how to deal with rogues and could be easily tricked. But if the son was gullible, the father would have to be shrewd and strong to protect his family. As a protector of the devotees and of Krishna's mission, Prabhupada wanted to establish good housing so that his disciples could serve Krishna in comfort, even elegance. Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had taught the same thing when he had said that preachers of Krishna consciousness should have the best of everything because they are doing the best service to Krishna. Prabhupada was therefore determined to establish his Hare Krishna city in Bombay. He did not take the attitude of a naked mendicant who cares for nothing of this material world. He felt responsible for his thousands of disciples and therefore he took on so many anxieties. Mr. N could not know what motives were driving Srila Prabhupada, nor could he imagine the ramifications of opposing Krishna and Krishna's pure devotee, even though the danger of such a position has been explained or had been explained in India's most famous classics, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Ramayana. Prabhupada was fighting on the side of Krishna. Therefore, Mr. N was opposing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By Prabhupada's disciples' cancellation of the agreement, ISKCON's legal position had been weakened. But Prabhupada had faith that if the devotees just maintained possession of the land, their position would remain strong. At the same time, he urged the devotees to preach more. They should not think that without a temple they could not preach. So he arranged for another big Bombay Pandal festival downtown, which proved to be a great success with 20,000 attending nightly. Important guests like Mr. R.K. Ganatra, the mayor of Bombay, made introductory speeches, and the devotees also took an active part, organizing, advertising, cooking, and distributing prasadam, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and preaching at a question and answer booth. The Pandal festival served to lift the devotees out of the doldrums of their protracted legal fight and the austerity of their living at Juhu. During the last week of January 1973, Prabhupada met with Mr. N at the residence of Mr. Mahadevia. All the Prabhupada's lawyers had filed a criminal case against Mr. N. Prabhupada wanted to attempt an out of court settlement. He had always been gracious and charming with Mr. N, and Mr. N had always appeared responsive and polite. But this time was different. Gone were the smiles and friendly words. The two were remaining barely civil to each other. After a few minutes, Prabhupada asked his disciples to leave the room. Speaking in Hindi, Mr. N began accusing Prabhupada and the devotees of being connected with the CIA. I'll come on Monday, said Mr. N tersely, with a check of 2 lakhs to pay back your down payment. All right, Prabhupada replied. If you don't want to part with your land, then we will leave. But think before you do this. Mr. N continued his accusations. You people are calling yourselves the owner of the land, but you're just a big disturbance to the whole area, getting a bit for and all this. We do not claim to be the owner, Prabhupada replied. Krishna is the real owner. I am not the real owner. Krishna is already there on his land. Why are you bothering us so much? Simply take the money and give us the land. Or if you want us to vacate, then prepare the check. Prabhupada had been speaking with restraint, but now his tone became angry. Bring out your check and we will vacate tomorrow morning. No, we will vacate tonight. Give us our money back. Have you the money? Mr. N shouted. I removed the deities myself. I'll break the temple and remove the deities. Mr. N then stormed out of the room. That week, Mr. N was hospitalized after a severe heart attack. 2 weeks later, he died. Mrs. N, although not as legally astute as her late husband, carried on the fight, and her lawyers, eager to collect their fees, pursued even more intently than she the litigation to drive out iskcon. In April 1973, at iskcon's instigation, iskcon's case came from the High Court, where there were tactical delays, however, and month after month passed with no decision. Prabhupada did not commit himself to construction on the land because he had no deed and no assurance of one. He toured the West, returned to India, but still nothing had happened to resolve the matter. Life in ISKCON Bombay was peaceful, but progress remained stunted, the outcome uncertain. Then one day, without warning, Mrs. N launched a violent attack. On the morning of June 1, while the devotees were attending to their routine duties, a truck drove out onto the Juhu property. A demolition squad had come to dismantle the temple. Somehow, Mrs. N had convinced an official in the city government to authorize demolition of the temple, a modest structure of brick and steel reinforced concrete. When Giriraj attempted to show the officer in charge a letter establishing ISKCON's rights, the man ignored the letter and signaled for the demolition to begin. Soon more trucks arrived until nearly 100 demolitionists working with blow torches and sledgehammers swarmed over the property. The demolitionists mounted ladders and began breaking the roof of the temple hall with sledgehammers. Others used torches to cut through the steel supports. The plan of the demolition squad was to knock out the steel supports of the Kirtan hall and proceed methodically toward the deity house where Radha Rasvihari stood. The devotees tried to stop the demolition, but policemen soon appeared on the scene and, working in pairs, would grab the dissenters by the legs and arms and carry them away. Police dragged the woman away by the hair while tenants on the land looked on. Some were glad to see the demolition, others, although others were sympathetic. Out of fear of the police, however, no one moved to help the devotees. One devotee, Manasvi, ran to a telephone and called Mr. Mahadevia, who, along with his friend Mr. Vinod Gupta, rushed to Hare Krishna land to find the police dragging off the last protesting devotee by the hair. She had been trying to close the doors to the altar to protect the deities when three policemen had wrestled her away. Mr. Mahadevia rushed to the house of a sympathetic tenant, Mr. Acharya, and phoned his brother Chandra Mahadevia, a wealthy businessman and friend of Bal Thakur, the leader of one of the most influential political parties in Mumbai. Mr. Chandra Mahadevia informed Bal Thakur of the emergency. At the instigation of a Hindu and under the order of a Hindu municipal officer, a Hindu temple of Lord Vishnu was being demolished. Mr. Thakur in turn informed the municipal commissioner, who denied knowing of any order to demolish the temple, and who in turn phoned the local ward office that had sent out the demolition squad. The ward office sent a man to stop the demolition. The officer arrived around 2 p.m., just as the demolition squad had cut through the last pillars and were dismantling the roof above the deities. The order to stop the demolition was given to the ward officer in charge, who then stopped the demolition squad. Prabhupada was in Calcutta at the time of the attack, and when the devotees reached him by phone, he told them to organize the local ISKCON sympathizers and life members and protest the attacks by mass publicity. They should also expose the persons responsible. This would be very effective against Mrs. N and her party. Prabhupada mentioned various life members he thought would help. Mr. Sada Jivatlal, the head of the Hindu Vishwa Parishad, should help with publicity since his organization was a defender of Hindu Dharma and was meant for handling such cases as this. Mr. Sethi should help in preventing further violence. This episode, Prabhupada said, had been part of Krishna's plan. The devotee should not be afraid. The next morning, a photo of the demolished temple appeared on the front page of the Free Press Journal with the headline, Unauthorized Temple Demolished by Municipal Authorities. Devotees began counteracting the bad publicity. Mr. Sadajivatlal turned his downtown office into an ISKCON office, and he and the devotees began the campaign. Despite the unfavorable propaganda, many Indians were shocked at the violence, and the municipal corporation unanimously condemned those officials responsible for the attack on a Hindu temple. The devotees working from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at Sadajivatlal's office phoned the newspapers, wrote letters and circulars, and contacted possible sympathizers. Mr. Vinod Gupta, a member of the Jan Sangh political party, which favored maintaining India's Hindu culture, joined with Kartikeya Mahadevi and others to form a Save the Temple committee. Mr. Gupta published his own leaflet declaring iskcon to be a bona fide Hindu organization. As Giriraj met with and elicited the support of government officials, many of Bombay's leading citizens, appreciating the authenticity of the Hare Krishna movement, began to show sympathy and offer assistance. Yes, let's read further. Hanit Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. Thus, the plan of Mrs. N and her lawyers backfired. Although they had been thinking they were dealing with only a mere handful of young foreigners, they soon found themselves facing many of the Bombay's most influential citizens. Srila Prabhupada had predicted that the results would be positive. A few days later, after the incident, he wrote, "The demolition of a temple by the municipality has strengthened our position. The municipality Standing Committee has condemned the hasty action of the municipality and has agreed to reconstruct the shed at their cost. Not only that, the temporary construction shall continue to stay until the court decision is there as to who is the proprietor of the land. Under the circumstances, we should immediately reconstruct the deity shed. Barbed wire fencing should be immediately done to cover the naked land, and if possible, immediately in front of the deity shed, a temporary pandal should be constructed with our materials. If it is so done, then I can go to Bombay and begin Bhagavad Parayana to continue until the court decision is there. This is my desire." The devotees began to see the entire course of event as Krishna's mercy. Since many life members were now rendering valuable service to Prabhupada and Lord Krishna, in the past, Prabhupada had stayed in the homes of many life members, preaching to them and their families, convincing them of his sincerity and of the noble aims of his movement. These friends and members, like Bhagubai Patel, Bihari Lal Khandelwal, Brij Ratan Mohata, Dr. C. Bali, and others, were acting not simply out of Hindu sentiment, but out of deep respect and affection for Prabhupada. Giriraja was working with Sada Jivatlal, tried to convince the municipal council to authorize the rebuilding of the temple structure. While doing so, however, he discovered that Mrs. N had that very day, a Friday, filed for a court injunction preventing iskcon from rebuilding. Justice Nain told Giriraj that he did not want to grant Mrs. N's request and that he would hear devotees' case on the following Monday. This meant that the devotees had from Saturday morning to Monday morning 2 days to rebuild the temple. The devotees reasoned that although they had no actual permission to rebuild the temple, there was as yet no law to stop them. If Justice Nain ruled against them, then to rebuild would be very difficult. They decided, therefore, to use the weekend to rebuild. Mr. Lai, a former contractor, helped arrange material, bricks, mortar, asbestos sheet. Mr. Sethi offered a crew of laborers. At 8 p.m. on Friday, the masons began their work, continuing throughout the night despite the rain. And on Monday morning, when the judge leaned out of the new temple, he declared, "What is built is built. No one can destroy the temple." When Prabhupada heard the news, he considered it a complete victory. The temple had been rebuilt and public opinion was swinging strongly in ISKCON's favor. Mayapur, June 1st, 1973. Although the Mayapur building was not yet completed, Prabhupada had come here to reside. He took two adjoining rooms, one as his study and one as his bedroom, on the second floor. Meanwhile, construction work continued in the temple room and in the other parts of the building. On the first day, there a storm struck with. Prabhuji, could you please scroll up? On the first day, there a storm struck with a massive black clouds and high winds. The storm was brief, however, the damage was minimal. I have just come to Mayapur and am very hopeful to regain my strength and health on account of being in this transcendental atmosphere. Every moment we are passing here in great delight. In the evening, the temple pujari, Jananivasa, would come to Prabhuji? would come to Prabhupada's room with a clay pot of red coals and frankincense and fan the frankincense till the room was filled with smoke. This was to drive out insects, but Prabhupada also considered it purifying. Although he sometimes disturbed by the workers hammering, he found the atmosphere otherwise peaceful. Only a few devotees were staying there, and Prabhupada gave his attention to translating or to speaking with the guests and to the devotees in charge of developing this Mayapur center. He would express his desires, especially to Bhaktivedanta Maharaj and Jai Pataka Maharaj, and worked his will through them. The devotees living in the building with Prabhupada considered themselves menial servants in Prabhupada's personal house. Of course, all the buildings in iskcon belonged to Prabhupada. Yet in Mayapur, that sense was intensified. Generally, the devotees in each particular center would raise money to support their center. But Prabhupada personally took charge of getting funds for Mayapur. He had begun Mayapur Vrindavan Trust a fund of donations from his disciples and interest from bonds and security deposits. If money was misspent, energy misused, or building damaged in any way, Prabhupada would become very concerned. Now that he was personally on the scene, he often walked about giving detailed instructions and demanding that discrepancies be corrected. The pink and reddish building was like a huge transcendental ship, and Srila Prabhupada, as captain, would walk the wide verandas, giving strict orders to all mates for keeping everything ship-shape. Prabhupada felt affection and deep gratitude for those devotees dedicating their life to the Mayapur project. One night, he called Bhavananda to his room and began asking him about the devotees. Suddenly, Prabhupada began crying. I know it is difficult for all of you, Western boys and girls, he said. You are so dedicated serving here in my mission. I know you cannot even get prasadam. When I think that you cannot even get milk and that you have given up your opulent life to come here, you do not complain, I am very much indebted to all of you. Avananda. The marble workers lived in some chatai houses right near the construction site. There was a hand pump just outside the building. That's where we took our bath and where the workers got the water for the cement. Some distance off were two toilets, one for the men, one for the women. It was just two holes in the ground, and each hole surrounded by a chatai wall. The storms and the rain would come, and we would have to sludge through the mud in the fields to go to the toilets. There were snakes all over the place. It was wild. It was a construction site. No one lives on a construction site, but we did. Srila Prabhupada made us move there. It was good for us. No bathrooms, nothing, just open floors with concrete. Although the devotees endured the austerities of living at the Mayapur Center construction site, they sometimes felt that it was too difficult. But Srila Prabhupada never considered it too difficult, and he would encourage the devotees. Mayapur is so wonderful. You can live on air and water alone. The surrounding grounds were rice fields, and to get to the temple building from the entrance of the property, a distance of more than 200 yards, devotees would have to walk on paths made by ridges of earth that separated one rice field from another. The kitchen, which was made of tarpaulin and bamboo, was located near the entrance of the property. The devotees had to live without electricity much of the time since the power supply was often cut off. They would use kerosene lamps at night, and Prabhupada said the lamps should be taken apart every day, the wicks trimmed, and the glass washed. In future, he said, you should grow castor plants and crush the seeds and take the oil for burning. Prabhupada told the devotees how to build simple dwellings. He also wanted them to build a wall with a gate along the front of the property. He would build small rooms, hutments, he called them, against the wall. Devotees would stay in these simple cottages. They would plant coconut and banana trees. Even with the building incomplete, many guests were coming, especially to talk to with Prabhupada, who patiently spent many hours each day speaking about Krishna consciousness with guests who came to inquire about his movement or who came only to talk about themselves and their own philosophy. Sometimes he would remark that an individual had wasted his time, but he never stopped anyone from seeing him. One wealthy Hindu man, Mr. Brij Ratan Mohata, and his wife, a daughter of multimillionaire R.D. Birla, visited Prabhupada from Kolkata. Srila Prabhupada took care of in properly hosting his guests, and he personally reviewed the menu and briefed his disciples on serving Mr. Mohata and his wife. Offering prasadam was an important part of the Vaishnava etiquette, and Srila Prabhupada always stressed that the devotees immediately offer prasadam to the visitors.
Thank
You
you,
should always
Mataji.
be
Thank you.
able to Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Usha Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. You should always be able to offer water, hot puris, and eggplant bhaji, fried eggplant, and sweets. Prabhupada said, even when guests appeared shy, Prabhupada would insist they take a full meal. Mrs. Mohata, even though a member of one of the wealthiest families in India, was satisfied with simple hospitality Srila Prabhupada and his disciples offered. The room, the room she and her husband stayed in was unfinished. The slate floors hadn't been polished, and construction work was going on all around. And the devotees could only offer them a mattress on the floor with a pillow, yet they appeared to be quite satisfied and appreciative. Bhavananda Srila Prabhupada introduced us to many of the details of Indian culture at Mayapur. In 1970, in Los Angeles, he had asked me to sew sheets together to make a covering for rugs in his room. And then he had gotten down on his hands and knees right next to me, and when had smoothed out the wrinkles in the sheet. So he had us do that same thing in Mayapur, where we put mattresses from one end of the room to the other with bolster pillows against the wall. Now you have white sheet covers, he said, and you change these every day. When Bengali gentlemen visited Srila Prabhupada in his room, they would sit on these mattresses around the edge of the room, their backs against the bolster pillows. It was very aristocratic. The whole mood was that he was the Mahant, the master of the house, the Acharya. But also the aristocratic Bengali gentleman saw that he was re-establishing the old aristocratic mood from the early 1900s to 1920s. It was from Prabhupada's old, Prabhuji, kindly scroll up, old days with the Mullik family, and it was rapidly dwindling. At that time, you couldn't find a semblance of the old culture anywhere because all those families had become degraded and their wealth was gone. During this summer visit, Prabhupada further revealed his vision for iskcon's Mayapur development. The devotees were already aware that the plan was vast and would cost millions of dollars. They had now had one building, but this was only the beginning. In the total plan, this building was almost insignificant. Prabhupada spoke about a colossal temple, its great dome rising above the transcendental city. This Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir would house the greatest planetarium of the world, depicting the universe as it is described in the Vedic literature. To execute such a project, Prabhupada wanted to train his disciples in the Vedic arts, now dying in Bengal. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had been greatly interested in using dioramas to depict the, Prabhuji, kindly scroll up, to depict the Leela of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. And now Prabhupada wanted his own disciples to learn the art by studying under the local Mayapur artists. In June, Bharadraja Adideva Murti, the Isana arrived to begin to learn the art of doll making. Prabhupada also wanted a disciple to learn to make mridangas, and a potter began coming every day to teach Ishana how to mold they fired the clay shells. The devotees converted Prabhupada's original straw cottage into a workshop, and Prabhupada began inviting other disciples to come to Mayapur. Mayapur is already wonderful, being the transcendental birthplace of Lord Krishna. By using Western talents to develop this place, certainly it will become a unique in the world. The Mayapur city, Prabhupada said, would be fulfilled of the desires of the previous acharyas. The city would grow to a population of 50,000 and would become the spiritual capital of the world. Prabhuji, kindly scroll up. With his gigantic temple in the center and separate quarters for Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, the city would be a model for all other cities. The day would come when the world's cities would be ruined and humanity would take refuge in cities modeled after Mayapur. The development of Mayapur would mark the beginning of Krishna conscious world. The influence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would increase and his prediction would manifest. In every town and village, my name will be chanted. Prabhuji, kindly scroll up.
Thank you, Mataji. Vijay Krishnan Mataji, please continue.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat pranam. Prabhupada said that Mayapur should eventually become more easily accessible by bridge from Navadvipa, by motor launch up the Ganges from Calcutta and from all parts by air. In Bengal, millions were by birth followers of Lord Chaitanya, and they would recognize and take up Krishna consciousness as the pure form of their own culture. There is a saying, what Bengal does, the rest of India follows. So, if Bengal becomes reformed and purified by the Krishna conscious example of American Vaishnavas, then all India would follow. And when all India becomes Krishna conscious, the whole world would follow. I have given you the kingdom of God. Prabhupada said to his Mayapur managers, now take it, develop it, and enjoy it. June 27, 1973. From Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada went to Calcutta. He wrote to Tamal Krishna Goswami, there is a suggestion by Shyam Sundar that I may go to London for meeting very important men there in the new house given by George. But I want to make some definite settlement of Bombay affairs before I return to Europe or America. If there is a suitable place for me to stay for a few days in Bombay, I can go there immediately and from there I may go to London. While considering his itinerary, Prabhupada passed some days in the Calcutta temple on Albert Road. He was very free about allowing people to see him, and his room was often filled with some local Bengalis as well as his own disciples. Seated in the white sheet from Prabhu, please white sheet before him. In the evening, he would go even when it meant riding for miles through congested parts of the city to spend an hour in someone's home preaching Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's sister, Bhavatarini, known as Paschima to Prabhupada's disciples, would also visit the Calcutta temple to see her beloved brother and, as usual, to cook for him. One day, however, a few hours after eating her kachoris, Prabhupada felt sharp pain in his stomach. He closed his doors and went to bed. His followers became very concerned. When his servant Shrutakirti came into the room, he found him tossing. Srila Prabhupada, what's wrong? My stomach, Prabhupada replied. That coconut kachori, it was not cooked. The seizure continued all night, and several devotees continuously massaged Prabhupada's body, especially his stomach. But with every breath he would bow. Pishima was standing by, But Prabhupada's disciple feared her presence, thinking she might want to cook something else for him, even in his illness. Prabhupada asked that the picture of Lord Nrsimha be taken from the altar and put beside his bed. Some devotees feared that Prabhupada might be about to pass away. The next morning, when the illness continued, the devotees called for the local Kaviraja, Ayurvedic doctor. The old Kaviraja came and diagnosed Prabhupada's illness as severe blood dyspnea. He left medicine, but it was ineffectual. Later, when Prabhupada called Bhavananda to his room and requested fried puris with little patala and Indian vegetables similar to small squash and salt, Bhavananda protested. Such fried foods would be, Prabhu, please scroll up. Such fried foods would be worst thing for him. Prabhupada said that this was the blood dysentery cure his mother had given during his childhood. He then called for his sister and speaking to her in Bengali, told her to prepare puris and patala. A few hours after taking the food, Prabhupada again called Bhavananda. He was feeling better. My mother was right, he remarked. A lengthy telegram arrived from Shamsundara glorifying the preaching opportunities that awaited Prabhupada in London, where he would be picked up at the airport in a helicopter and flown to the main event, the greatest Rath Yatra ever held. The parade would proceed down Piccadilly Lane, climaxing under a large pavilion at Trafalgar Square. Let me strike while the iron is hot, he said. I think that is an English maxim. If you would do that, then you can keep the iron in shape. In the West, people are fed up. So we want to give them spiritual enlightenment. Prabhupada had immediately convinced his disciples with his forceful statements. There are two misleading theories in the West. He continued. One is that life comes from matter, and the other is that there is no life after death. So you can just enjoy this life. They say everything is matter. So as this Krishna consciousness movement grows, the communists will curb down. People say that they are trying for unity, but they have no brains to see how this will achieve unity. They have formed a big complicated League of Nations and now United Nations, but they all fail. But this simple method of Rath Yatra, all over the world it is spreading. Jagannatha means Lord of Universe. So Lord Jagannatha is now international God through our iskcon. Therefore, I want to go to the West and give them this space. Although Prabhupada appeared physically unfit to immediately fly to London to the active preaching that awaited him, his disciples submitted of accepting this as another miracle by Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Pushpa Kanna Mataji.
Pranam Guruji. London, July 7, 1973. Paravidha, it was Rath Yatra day. I saw Prabhupada coming into temple and he did not look very strong. I was really amazed, but I could understand that his strength was something spiritual. Dhruvanatha at the parade site, we are waiting to receive Srila Prabhupada at Marble Arc where the procession starts. The Vyasana was nicely decorated and everybody was expecting Prabhupada simply to sit on Vyasa Asana on the cart and just ride through the street, just as he had done in the other Rath Yatra. So it was to our great amazement and joy that when Prabhupada came, he refused to sit on Vyasasana. He indicates that he would dance and lead the procession. Yogeshwara, they brought stairs up so Prabhupada could mount the Rath Ratha cart and sit down on the Vyasasana, but he waved them off and just start walking with chariot leading the dancing. Dhira Santa, I twisted my ankle and could not walk, so I rode on the cart. Therefore, I could see Prabhupada very clearly. Revati Nanda, Maharaja was chanting into microphone from the cart, but after about 15 minutes, the procession, Prabhupada told devotees to tell Revati Nanda Maharaja and the others to come down and lead the kirtan in the street with him. Revatinanda, when Prabhupada saw his Vyasasana on the cart, he said, "No, I am just a devotee. I will go in the procession." We had a big, great kirtana. Haran Sadhuta led, I led, Shama Sundara led, different devotees straight off, leading this fantastic kirtana, and Prabhupada was right in the middle of the kirtana. And his karatala, the whole time, he was dancing back, forth, and jumping up and down and dancing. Rohini Nanda, the cart was going quite slowly. Prabhupada walked about 20 or 30 yards ahead of cart, leading the procession. Meanwhile, the kirtana was coming from Rath cart through microphone. Prabhupada called them all down and he got them all around himself and they were chanting Hare Krishna. Every so often he could turn around and raise both his arms very majestically in air and say, Jaya Jagannatha. Sometimes we would get a very little further ahead. So then he would turn around and wait for the cart to come on. Sometimes he was dancing and sometimes he would stand, raising his hands in the air. Sharadya Dasi, Prabhupada would dance and then after a few feet he would turn around and look up at the deities and his arms raised. Then he would dance for a few moments, meditating on the deities, and then he would turn around and go on. In this way, he danced the entire way. The devotees held hands in a circle around him to protect him from the crowd. It was a wonderful transcendental affair. Prabhupada was looking up at the deities, and all the devotees were behind him. Sudur Jaya, Prabhupada surprised us. We did not know if he was sick and not, feeling weak and dizzy or not. Sometimes he looked very ill and sometimes he looked like an 18-year-old boy. He surprised us. He had his cane in his hand but raised it in the air as he danced. After a while, Shama Sundara came up to me and said, "Listen, he is not going to make it. Prabhupada is very ill. I want you to follow in a car. Be within 30 seconds. Reach so we can put Prabhupada in the car immediately." Prabhupada was going down Park Lane, and from time to time he could not pull the cart very fast to keep up with him. He would turn back, raise his hands, and say Hari Bol several times. He did so. He was going so fast and he had to wait. Devotees were dancing, the weather was beautiful, and the crowd was wonderful. Dhruvanatha, the passerby, was rooted to its spot, looking at Prabhupada, a man of that age, simply dancing and jumping in the air like a young boy, was most amazing sight. And then every 5 minutes or so, Prabhupada would turn around and look towards Jagannatha. The devotees would clear the way, so no one blocked his sight, and he had a perfect view of Jagannatha, Balarama, and Subhadra. But after a while, a police came and mentioned that we could not keep stopping like this. We had to keep the whole thing going because the traffic jam was coming critical. Devotees were crying and chanting and dancing. There was much commotion. Sukriti, when Prabhupada was dancing, the bobbies kept on coming up and looking for someone official. Finally, they came to me and said, You will have to tell your leader to sit down. He is causing too much of a disturbance. Everyone is becoming wild and we cannot control the crowd. You know, so I said, all right, but I did not say anything to Prabhupada. So then they came again and said, you must tell him he will have to sit down. So I said, all right. And I tapped Prabhupada the whole time he had in acasepticity, dancing before the cart and encouraging everyone else to dance. He would motion with his hands and encourage the devotees to keep dancing. He kept the momentum of the festival. So I said, Prabhupada, the policemen want to you down. They say you are cleaning havoc in the parade. Prabhupada looked at me and turned and kept on. He completely ignored it and kept on dancing. And they could not do anything. Prabhupada could not stop and police would not say anything to him.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Sudhir Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Aravida. I was on Dhruvanatha. When we came to Piccadilly Circus, Prabhupada suddenly stopped the whole procession. Piccadilly Circus, of course, was just packed. For about 3 minutes, Prabhupada stopped the procession and just danced and danced with devotees all around him. Nandana.
Bro, your microphone is not working well. The volume sometimes goes very low, sometimes loud. So,
What about now, Prabhu?
it's the same, no? Sometimes it is faint, sometimes it's loud. Can you speak into the microphone?
Can you just give me a minute, Prabhu? I'll put on my earphones.
All right, someone else can read. Neha Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dhruvanatha. When we came to Piccadilly Circus, Prabhupada suddenly stopped the whole procession. Piccadilly Circus, of course, was just packed with people. For about 3 minutes, the procession and just danced and danced with the devotees all around him. Rohini Nandana. When we got to Piccadilly Circus, Prabhupada really started to dance. He was leaping the ground. The cart was stopped. Prabhuji, you need to scroll. The cart was stopped, and then Prabhupada would wait for it to catch up. Yogeshwara. When we finally arrived at Trafalgar Square and Prabhupada saw the big tent and the other arrangements the devotees had made, he clapped his hands again. He had been dancing and walking the entire route of the parade. It must have been at least an hour that he had been walking and dancing, all the way from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square. Rohini Nandana. When Prabhupada got to Trafalgar Square, he immediately sat down on the plinth of Nelson's column on a little Vyasasana and delivered a lecture about the holy name of Krishna. This was directly after his marathon of chanting and dancing. The next day's papers carried favorable news coverage of the festival, and Prabhupada wrote of it to a disciple in Los Angeles. Scroll, please. You will be glad to know the Rath Yatra in London was very successful. The Daily Guardian had a picture of our cart and stated that we were competition to the monument in memory of Lord Nelson in Trafalgar Square. My health is good and I am taking daily walks and speaking at the class in the morning. In another letter, Prabhupada wrote, our festival here was very well received and I was so much encouraged by the whole thing that I was able to walk and dance the entire way from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square. The devotees had invited many prominent British citizens to meet Srila Prabhupada, and the responses were good. Economist Ernst Schumacher promised to visit, as did philosopher Sir Alfred J. Ayer. When Shyamasundara informed Prabhupada that Mr. Iyer was well known, Prabhupada replied, "What is his philosophy?" Well, Shyamsundara replied, "He doesn't believe in the existence of God." "I will give him evidence," Prabhupada replied. "I will ask him what he means by the existence of God. I will ask him to make a list of the deficiencies of God's existence." Prabhupada liked to meet with philosophical men and corner them and defeat them. Historian Arnold Toynbee was old and invalid. Therefore, Prabhupada agreed to visit him at his residence. Interested in discussing life after death, Dr. Toynbee asked Prabhupada about karma. Most people, he said, were afraid of death. Prabhupada agreed and added that according to a certain astrologer, one of India's recent leaders had taken birth as a dog. So they are afraid they will go down, he said. When Toynbee asked if karma could be changed, Prabhupada replied yes, but only by bhakti, devotion to God. George Harrison approached Prabhupada in a submissive mood similar to that of Prabhupada's disciples. Prabhupada and George took prasadam together, a special lunch of samosas, halwa, vegetables, sour cream, and puris. While they were enjoying the prasadam, Prabhupada mentioned that certain Vrindavan Pandas, professional guides at a holy place, eat too much. Once one ate so much that he was practically dying, but he assured his son, "At least I'm dying from eating and not from starving." To die of starvation is unglorious. Prabhupada smiled as he talked with George, gratefully acknowledging his donation of the manor. "Have you seen my room?" Prabhupada asked. "It is actually your house, but my room."
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Shamana Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. When George confided to Prabhupada that my taking to Krishna consciousness, he was losing friends, Prabhupada told him not to worry. He read to George from the Gita, where Krishna explains that he can be known only by devotional service. In the future, said George, iskcon will be so large it will require executive management. Prabhupada, I have divided the world into 12 zones with 12 representatives. As long as they keep to the spiritual principles, Krishna will help them. Can you scroll, Prabhu? Before leaving, George assured Prabhupada that he would help him increase his temples. Later, Prabhupada commented, George is getting inward hope from Krishna. Through George Harrison, another famous pop singer and musician, Donovan was drawn to come and see the renowned leader of the Hare Krishna movement. Donovan, accompanied by a musician friend and their two girlfriends in miniskirts, sat in awkward silence before Prabhupada spoke. There is a verse in the Vedas that says music is the highest form of education, and he began to explain how a musician could serve Krishna. You should do like your friend George. Prabhupada said, we will give you the themes and you can write the songs. Prabhupada said that anything, even money, could be used in the service of Krishna. But money is material. Donovan's girlfriend interrupted. What do you know what is material and what is spiritual? Prabhupada said. He turned to Donovan. Do you understand? Donovan humbly replied that he was thick-headed but trying. Donovan's girlfriend then leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Whereupon Donovan stood up and said, well, we have to go now. Prabhupada insisted that at least they first take some prasadam. As soon as the guest left, Prabhupada and his disciples began to laugh. Prabhupada said she was thinking, and he encouraged his disciple to finish the sentence. Yes, said Yogeshwara, she was thinking that if Krishna gets him, then she will lose him. Prabhupada so much liked preaching to important guests that he wanted to continue doing so wherever he traveled. Wherever I shall go now, Prabhupada wrote in a letter to a disciple, this policy of important men being invited to talk with me about our Krishna consciousness movement should be implemented. Can you please scroll, Prabhu? A month passed at the manor, and still several weeks remained before Janmashtami and the deity installation. So when Bhagavan requested Prabhupada to come for a visit to Paris and install Radha Krishna deities, Prabhupada agreed. Can you
Stop
please?
here. Thank you.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Time. We'll continue in the next class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.